Hi, everyone, and welcome into the panel room of ConTinual. Our topic tonight is a romance reader love-in, and my guests are Jeanne Adams, Eilis Flynn, Gail Z / Morgan Brice, and Rebecca Turner, who writes Becke Turner. So I'd like to start by everybody going around, just introduce yourselves, tell people who you are and what you write. And Becke, let's start with you.
My name is Becke Turner, and I write contemporary romance, and I released 4 since November, and I'm preparing to release number 5, and I write about small town romance.
Gail?
Hi, I'm Gail Z and Morgan Brice. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, steampunk, and more. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance.
Eilis?
I'm Eilis Flynn, and I write fantasy, mystery, and contemporary.
And Jeanne?
I'm Jeanne Adams. I write paranormal romance, paranormal romantic suspense, and romantic suspense, urban fantasy, and space adventure with our host, Nancy Northcott.
And as I think I may have said or may not have said, because Space, the Final Frontier, I'm Nancy Northcott, your host, and I write romantic suspense, romantic spy adventure, paranormal romance, and historical fantasy with romantic elements. So since this is a romance reader love-in, let's start with, what is a romance exactly? What makes a book a romance instead of just a book with a romantic storyline in it? Gail, you want to start?
Well, I think that the canonical answer for that is supposed to be that it has a happily ever after or a happily for now. Any story that has romantic elements in it but does not have a happily ever after or a happily for now has romantic elements but isn't technically a romance. The money back guarantee on a romance is that they will end up together either for good or for now. And so you don't have to be on pins and needles the whole time to know if they will. The only question is, how do they get there?
So it's the journey, not the destination.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it, because it's comfort reading, and you don't want to have gone through all of this only to find out they go their separate ways. You want to know they get together, and then you can sit back and enjoy all the thrills and spills.
Becke, did you have something to add?
Well, I think it also has to traditionally fall in the guidelines of women's values.
You want to amplify that a little?
Want to expand on that? I think it's a respect for family. I think it's a respect for the lovers, regardless of gender. I think that's primarily it.
Okay. Jeanne, do you have anything to put into this pot?
Well, I think that now we're also looking at, as Becke indicated, it's not just lovers in general. It can be anyone that you love. So, but I think we finally have moved into a space where, as Becke indicated, it's about people. You're also sort of guaranteed that the lovers meet each other where they are and respect who the other one is. We no longer have a lot of the kind of romantic threads where they're trying to change somebody or improve somebody or whatever. We're luckily getting to where we are meeting lovers where they are, and then they are finding each other where they are and going from there to that happily ever after.
Eilis, anything to add?
Yeah. No, I think it's been pretty much said.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add either. So
I think the only thing I just amplify is that because I write in the male and LGBTQ side of things, that I know Becke mentioned women's values. I think it's broader than that when we're talking about the whole spectrum of romance. So the 2 main characters falling in love can be any gender, and it's the love that matters.
yeah, and actually that reminds me of something that I don't think we covered, which is that you can have a book that has a romantic plot that has a happily ever after conclusion to that plot line. But if it's not, it used to be the core of the story. Now we've kind of gotten away from that in what we market and buy as romance, but it still has to be central to the story, important to the story. It can't be just kind of laced through there as something that pops up every now and again, I think.
It has to be the linchpin, because otherwise it's, as you said, it's just being shoehorned in, and it's not a real romance. It is, whatever that would be with a romantic element, and sometimes barely that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the editors for Falstaff Books posted something recently when she was talking about romance in general. And she said, just because you have a really hot love scene, that does not make your book a romance. It's a lot more than that. And I think people who don't read a lot of it, or who are setting out to write it, as one woman told me, she was setting out to write it because so many people buy it, which was more true back then, and you make a lot of money. Really, yes.
Sorry, that's a funny joke.
One of the things I notice writing stuff that isn't romance, and now more recently writing romance, is like you said, the percentage of the book that focuses on the interplay between the two people and their thoughts and their feelings and their getting together is so much more, takes up so much more of the book and is so much more central to the plot than in a book where it's mostly an action adventure. And oh yes, since you can't fight all the time, sometimes people make love. And what I always say about my Morgan Brice books is they're solidly urban fantasy and solidly romance. So I probably split it 50-50, 60-40, but there's a whole lot more thinking about, will he, won't he, does he, doesn't he, do I not, what do we do? Oh my God, so I noticed that very much when I flop back and forth across my pen names. Is sometimes I have to go, no, we're not writing that kind of book. Okay, take that out. He can think it, but not on page. Come on.
But that is a point. If you're going to write other genres, those readers don't expect or want a romantic plot line to be central to the book. So it really does make a difference from a marketing standpoint.
Oh yeah.
Did you want to add something?
No, just.
I think one thing I think also is in a romance that it's primarily two character arcs that intersect and actually are able to make that arc because of the connection of the two together, regardless of who the two are. But that to me, that's the central love story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it helps drive the other plot in the book. So what do we like about romance? Why do we reach for it when we need something to read? Eilis, you want to start us?
I like romance because besides the happy ending, it means that society isn't falling apart faster than I think. It's comforting. But, that is the point of genre fiction in general. You can fit things in, but in the case of romance, it also means that, again, society is intact. Okay, that might be overreaching it, but yeah.
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
I think it's hopeful.
Yeah.
I think, you read it for the hope, because it does offer that hopeful element.
Well, and I think for me, I read it too, because one of my first takeaways from the first few romances that I read were, we as romance authors make our women okay with who they are, okay being in their power. And if men in their life don't like it, or other, their partners in life don't like it, well, that's heartbreaking, but too bad, so sad. And they go on until they they're willing to wait for the one that sees them as who they are and accepts them that way, rather than settling for something less. And when I started reading
Yes.
romance, I needed that message more than probably anything in my life at that point. And I think we as romance writers give the reader hope, as Becke says, but also that awareness that it's possible. Like Eilis said, the world is not all dark and horrible and gloomy and grim, and there's some bright sparks out there, and people actually can, even in the worst of times, find hope, find love.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's nice to have a guaranteed happy ending, because so much of real life doesn't, or strings you along for a very long time until you find out what the ending is, and that's nerve-wracking. And particularly in the male LGBTQ side of things, there's the affirmation that love is love, that people can see themselves in the book and not have to pretend that a character is like them, because the character is like them. And we all need that affirmation of seeing someone like us in the story. And for a long time, there wasn't a whole lot out there for the LGBTQ community where the characters thought like them, where the characters were who they were. And that's freeing and wonderful and affirming right there. And that's important. We need to see ourselves as we see ourselves on the page.
Yeah, and I think romance is in many ways the literature of healing. It ties into the whole theme of hope. But, we structure these stories and we give the characters some kind of internal conflict that keeps them from becoming a couple on page 15, because then the book is over. If we get to happily ever on page 15, well, that's it. So as a result, we tend to have a fair number of scarred and unhappy characters. So it's kind of like in the process of finding that person who sees them as they are and accepts them and loves them as they are, they also come to accept things about themselves, to see maybe that the scars that they carry are not their fault, or are something that they can finally move beyond, that they don't have to be inhibited by ugly things in their past. But I mean, it seems sort of to me that one of the big reasons people diss romance as a genre is that all this happiness is unrealistic. And they just...
I beg to differ. I mean, not obviously we don't say that because we write romance, but I've had people say to me, "Oh, well, I don't know anybody who's happily married." And I'm like,
Yeah, me too.
yeah,
Exactly.
it took
Almost 50 years. Yeah, 50 years next year.
wow. That's awesome. Now, see, it took me 2 tries, but the second time, aces. And, I mean, we all put our characters through unmitigated hell, whether it's a contemporary or a short, sweet romance in a small town, internally or externally, we've put them through the grinder. And I think that goes back to what you said, Gail, about, and Nancy too, about I think that's one of the misconceptions that people have, is that it's this sweet light story. All of them are these sweet light stories where everybody's perfect. Yeah. And I have yet to write a character that is perfect. Mm-hmm. And I would be bored as all get out if I did. I think that is a long past trope, that you've got, the perfect hero out there, Yeah, give me Shrek. I'd rather have Shrek than Prince Charming.
Well, there's...
Lair.
What?
With Lair.
Well, and there's the whole perfect hero, and then there's the image we don't seem to be able to shake as a genre, and it's the word bodice ripper. It just, it's so out of step with what the genre is. Yeah. And it's really kind of out of step with what the books in the 80s that inspired it were. I mean, do you all?
I just got this, they do make corsets for men now, and I just got this visual of one of my hot homicide cops having his bodice ripped off him, and I'm sorry, I missed the last thing that you said. I was a little preoccupied.
She was in the zone there.
Distracted, huh?
But, you know, I think going back to the whole idea of everything being perfect or a little too sweet, I think there are some people who unfortunately were raised to think that there is no joy in adulthood. There is no happiness. Happiness is just a mirage, and you're foolish if you think there's happiness, or that anybody is happy, or that you can be happy. And I feel so bad for these people, because somebody really stepped on their soul and ground it under their heel if they believe that. But they're the ones who are always dissing genre fiction as being escapist, like there's something wrong with that. Have you read the newspaper? We need to escape. Or that having a couple end up together and not, you know, cheat on each other and fall apart within 6 months is unrealistic. And I just look at them and go, what is your reality that you think that, or that's what you've seen, you poor person? Yeah. So, and I think some of those shriveled, embittered souls are running Hollywood studios or publishing houses, and they're looking to reinforce their own worldview, and they're wrong.
Now, that's one thing I will say, hallelujah, that we live in a great time in the sense that we have so many markets, so that our message of hope can kind of creep out around all that darkness and and say, you know, there is another way to look at this. And obviously the fact that romance sells, it's a $63 billion market, means that we have a lot of people who want to believe the way we believe. So.
And I think that even for people
out there want hope.
Yes.
I was just going to say, for people who haven't found their one happily ever after, it perpetuates the idea that they will, that it's out there, that they can find it. And that's a wonderful thing. We need hope.
Well, it is. And it also says you don't have to compromise who you are to find that person. And, you know, a lot of people, I think at some point in their lives, have to look at that and go, am I going to remake myself into something that's more attractive to the kind of people I'm attracted to? Or am I going to be true to myself until I find the person who likes that? You know, and romance says, yes, you can find that person. I mean, I don't think anybody would guarantee that everybody's going to find that person. But the genre says, if you hold on, you can find that person. You have a chance to find that person and be happy.
And I think there's an interesting middle path between your dichotomy there, which is sometimes you need to change who you are to be the kind of person that would be worthy of the love of somebody who can really love you back. Some of us had, you know, dysfunctional families or bad childhoods, and what we were brought up with as family and love is not a good model. And if you keep fighting the last battle, that gets in between you and maybe creating a healthy relationship. So sometimes it is looking at yourself and going, I got to quit fighting the last war, whether that's with an ex or a former partner or whatever, and go, I got to do some interior work on me so that I'm able to love somebody and they can love me and I can accept it. And that's not changing yourself up just because you want Mr. Handsome Pants to like you. That's doing the hard work to be able to love and accept love. And that's hard.
That is hard. Was somebody going to say something?
I think that's another misconception. Again, I think it goes back to the misconception that a lot of those shriveled souls, as you put it, Gail, lead into when they diss romance or genre fiction in general, is that we're not, any of us as writers, saying that either of these characters are perfect. We're saying that either they've already done the hard work and they've arrived at the spot where they can meet somebody, or we meet them where they're still doubting that, and because they meet this other person, they can accept that. And I think that, to me, is one of the most hopeful, going back to what Eilis said at the very beginning, is it's the most hopeful thing you can see, is that no matter, if there are bullets flying or, alien zipping or whatever, that you have somebody who gets you, no matter whether you've had to work hard on it yourself or remake yourself or reinvent yourself or whatever. I go back to what Becke and I both said about hope. I just think it's so hopeful.
Well, I grew up reading comic books, and I continued to read comic books into college. And my family assured me that this was very weird and it was going to be really bad for my prospects long term. But, I just thought, I like this. I enjoy this. If I have to give this up for a relationship, I'd seen around me, especially getting out of school, people who were active in comic book fandom and who were married to people who were not down with that. And so it was kind of, okay, am I going to give this up and look for a more conventional type of person? Or am I going to wait and see if I can find somebody who, even if he doesn't share in my eccentricity, isn't bothered by it? And so that's what I did find. He doesn't share in my eccentricity, but he has his own eccentricities. And so, we kind of bump along together. But that's what I was thinking about in terms of changing your... What? Eilis, did you say something?
What eccentricities? I said, what eccentricity?
Yeah, well, but yeah, we all kind of have to decide who we want to be as a grown-up. And that's kind of, whether it's a choice of what kind of stuff do you enjoy, or it's doing the hard work inside. And, some of people, I think, don't have the hard work to do inside until they have a bad relationship. And then they do have the hard work to do inside. And so there are a lot of different roads. And I think we tend to put our characters through all of them at some time or another, and make them face choices about themselves and about others. So with those circumstances kind of in mind, what tropes do you like?
I love friends to lovers, because to me, that's just a natural, and I've lived it, and friendship is so adjacent to love that it only takes the right circumstances to nudge somebody over. I love forced proximity, the snowed in a cabin. Lots of people get snowed in a cabin. That's fun. And second chance is fun. At least in the LGBTQ stories, the whole single dad thing is a big thing right now. Somebody, through whatever circumstances, finds themselves with a baby or a child, or adopts their sister's kid after she's killed in an accident. And now, of course, this makes him doubly attractive to all the other guys out there, sort of like walking a dog.
Walking a dog.
So I love all those, and probably a lot more I didn't even think of.
Anybody else?
Well, actually, my favorite is probably second chance. Second chances are always fun because you get to go back and you might listen, realize something, or you might do something completely new that will change everything. So it's really accommodating, and it allows you to just explore something that was right in front of you all that time.
Okay, anybody else?
I'm particularly fond of the Beauty and the Beast trope. The one or the other of them thinks that they're not attractive or not personable or not, not accessible, and the other one is like, of course you are. So that's one of my favorites, and I too like both second chances and friends to lovers because of the adjacency, like you said, Gail, of friends to lovers, but also friends means you already appreciate and accept who they are. And you got your weird on, hey, they're okay with it.
Becke?
Well, I think you guys have pretty much covered the ones I do like. I like most of the romances I write are a second chance at love. All of them are about returning or building a home. The things that I dislike, the worst one I think is marriage of convenience. I have a hard time with that unless it's I just can't, I can't get by that. I can't get by an intelligent human making that kind of sacrifice, you know, to give myself, you know, make a connection or a commitment to another person that I don't care for, and yet I'm doing it for some, you know, alternate means. So that one to me is a hard sell. But to be quite honest with you, I've read some authors that are able to pull that off, and so when they can, then it's a nice surprise, because you're saying, well, I don't usually like that, but I like this story. So that's always fun. But I prefer not that one.
Yeah.
Well, who are the people that you read that you thought pulled it off?
Of course, it's going to be Julie Garwood. But see, those are historicals. And so to me, it's a little more palatable in historical times because of, well, how suppressed that the non-dominant, well, let's just say the non-dominant in the relationship, because then that way it could be male-male or male-female or whatever. So the non-dominant person usually is suppressed in some way. And to me, I don't like to see that. But Julie and her, I don't know if you guys have read her old ones, but she was one that did that. And at the time, I was okay with that trope. Of course, I was probably 20, 30 years old. It makes a big difference in age group too, because you have different expectations at different ages for what you think a relationship is.
Well, and since you raised the subject of tropes that we don't particularly enjoy, what's everybody else think about that? What do you look at the book and go, I don't think so, if it's that thing?
May, December, I almost never will pick that up.
Yeah.
What's that?
So that's a romance where someone is at least a decade or two older than their partner.
Oh, I meant why. I'm sorry.
Oh, why do I not like them? Because that decade or two older, there's often an imbalance of power in the relationship, much like what Becke was saying about the historical. There's always someone who's a non-dominant role. And that is often just not, it just doesn't work for me mentally and emotionally to have that dichotomy of age group where, yeah, somebody's, you know, it smacks of trophy wives and all that sort of thing. I'd love to see somebody do it well with a trophy husband. That'd be fun.
I can recommend some. I'm not huge on enemies to lovers, depending on why they're enemies. If they have a real reason to dislike this person, then that's hard for me to get over, because maybe they really shouldn't be with this person. If it's a misunderstanding or something like that, okay, you know, you can get past that. Just you get on my nerves. Age gap, I can do. There's a difference between, you know, 30 and 45 and 20 and 35.
Depends on the age.
So it kind of depends on what the age gap is and what the other factors are, and whether or not, you know, this is playing into daddy kink and that kind of thing, which is not my thing, but not shaming anybody. And that's a power thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say enemies to lovers is probably the one I usually go, not unless it's really well recommended or I trust the author.
Eilis, what about you?
I'm not real fond of the marriage of convenience myself. It just makes me roll my eyes. And I really can't think of anything in a modern sense that it works with. I mean, unless you were talking about a political thriller romance in which, for some reason, they would get together, but I have yet to read anything in which it pays off. So I just keep rolling my eyes and go to something else.
Well, for me, it's Secret Baby. I have a lot of trouble with Secret Baby. Because you have a really good reason to keep that baby a secret from the parent. And usually in the books that I've read, which is not to say there are not people out there doing it, have a really good reason. I haven't read any where they had a really good reason. And I actually did write one, and some of you have heard me talk about this before. Jeanne and I were in an anthology with a DNA theme. And so we had my story all plotted, and I was writing it, and writing it was like slogging through cold molasses. I just could not get there. And I wrestled with it and wrestled with it. And finally I called Jeanne and said, I know why I'm having so much trouble with this story. It's a secret baby story. And she said, and?
I knew this all along.
Apparently everyone but me was attempting to write a secret baby story. I just hadn't thought of it that way. So we had to kind of mess with the rationale a little bit. And once we did that, I could plow right ahead with it. But I know there are types of relationships that are so toxic that you could make an argument for keeping a baby secret. It's just, I haven't seen any romance novels where they did that. But, you know, I'm not going to say it can't be done. Well, I mean, I wrote one, but we'll see. I don't know. I don't know. Nobody who's read the book said this is a stupid story, so maybe I did okay. We'll see. So when you're writing a story, let's switch gears for a minute and say, what do you start with? Jeanne?
Oh gosh, well, my stories start all sorts of different ways. Sometimes I have a dream about something. Sometimes I seldom start in the middle. I occasionally start knowing what the end is, but that's rare. I usually know what the inciting incident, I usually know where it begins. And often and frequently, as y'all know, in my books, it's something blowing up. Even when it's a paranormal romance, it often starts with something blowing up or someone dying. So
There's a happy ending.
I get there, Becke.
Yes.
Well, so how do you pick the theme as you're starting to do the story? How do you decide what trope you're going to use?
Honestly, I don't. In that respect, I'm far more of a pantser. I just kind of let it fly and see where it takes me and find out that I usually figure out the trope after I've written the book. Oh, well, that was a secret baby book. I've not written a secret baby book, but you know, it's friends to lovers. Oh, wow, I didn't know that was going to be that when I started it, but that's what it is now. So I don't generally know the trope.
Anybody else? Gail?
Depends. I mean, I've done some stories, finishing one right now that is in a multi-author shared world, and the prompt is right there, and it tells you what your tropes are, and everybody in that collection is going to have the same tropes. I should have mentioned one of my absolute favorites is Hurt Comfort, which is where, you know, someone rushes to the rescue, and that's fun, especially when you've got a character that doesn't seem like the rescuing type, like my squirrel shifter, who actually saves the day and is a badass. With my established relationship series, the trope is less of an issue because we're watching their relationship evolve, and then the rest is outside forces and dangers and things that they're fighting together. With the Fox Hollow series, where it's a different key couple every book, then I actually have mapped out changes, which tropes I think which books are going to feature, so that I don't end up writing the same book 6 times. And that's kind of a challenge to me, as well as and hopefully enticement to readers to go, hey, I switched this up. So we'll see.
Anybody else? Eilis, where do you start?
Most often, I start with a premise. But once I start with the premise, then I have to get into the details, and the details usually bog me down because I have to figure out how details fit with the premise. Like, I have started a story right now, and now that I have to figure out, I know how it starts, I have no idea how it progresses. And when that happens, it is so annoying because you're sort of wandering around saying, how is that logical? And the answer is, it's not. So I have to throw that part out. And, you know, after you throw out so many parts, you realize that the parts that you've thrown out is a very big, big pile. But what you've got left is very small, and basically, it's not going to work. That annoys me for obvious.
So I'm guessing you don't pick a trope in advance when you do that.
No, the trope usually comes as a surprise to me.
Becke?
Oh, good, I'm not alone.
I tried something different. I think the one that I just wrote, or I guess the one before that, I used Story Genius, and I went back and I started with the wound on the my primary character. And once I did that, then it was like, okay, so who do you pit against that? What's the circumstances for that? And then that brought together what my other character was going to be. But that worked out well because you knew the thing that bothered that person the most, the thing that she had to overcome. It was my my heroine, but you know, what did she have to overcome in her past that's making her the person she is today? So that was kind of an interesting way. I hadn't done anything like that before, but it turned out well. So I don't know if I'll try that again or not. Just, you know, ask me after I write the next new one. You know, usually it's revisions right now. I'm trying to do so many of my backlist to get them ready to go. But the next one, I think I'll do that again. I think that worked out well for me.
Yeah, I don't start with anything in particular consistently. I usually have an idea for where I want the story to go and then work on the characters. And sometimes it's the character's wound, but that's less important if you're not writing a romance, because you're not going to devote as much story time to it. So you don't want as much focus on it. But with a romance, I have trouble getting going if I don't know who the characters are. And I'll sometimes just sit down with a yellow pad and just free associate and write everything that comes into my head about that character if I'm having trouble with it. But I don't pick the trope in advance either. It kind of picks itself. And sometimes it's a surprise, and sometimes I kind of can see where it's sort of going based on the way the story is set up. There's one way that is smoother as the path for the relationship to follow. And sometimes you kind of kick that to the curb because it's so smooth going into that it's so obvious that you don't have any suspense in the story. And sometimes I think that needs to be, for me, I need to rework that at times. You know, like when you discover you're writing a secret baby story and you didn't realize you were, that kind of thing.
You turn it into a dog, you know.
Puppy story.
Story, not a baby story. I've been hiding this puppy from you.
Yeah, well, that book actually turned out to be Secret Baby, Friends to Lovers, Second Chance at Love, all kind of in a.
It's a great story. I love that story.
Secret Monster Baby.
That would be your basic, paranormal romance.
Monster Baby.
Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
That's a scary one too.
Yes.
Yeah. So we actually already talked about this a little bit, but what do you think are the worst misconceptions about romance out there?
One of the worst is that Nicholas Sparks writes romance.
Yeah. Yay, Jeannie, you got it in there.
I did. It's a burr under my saddle, man.
I'm telling you.
If everybody dies at the end, not a romance. If one hero is or heroine is dead,
Happy.
not a romance.
But she's a ghost and she comes
Yeah,
back.
not a romance. If they are not both corporeal in this world at this time, not a romance. That one drives me batshit crazy.
One that
You know that.
What?
She was so transparent,
No.
right?
Oh,
Yeah.
I think the one that drives me crazy is this idea that if two people have sex in a story, it must be smut. And it makes me so angry when I see people refer to romance as smutty stories or, oh, you write smutty stuff. No, I write people with normal biological urges. And when two people really like each other,
Him too.
there's and I really rebel at the implication that there's something dirty, bad, wrong about sex, especially when it's happening between two people who are very much in love with each other, whether they're married or not, regardless of where they are in the relationship. This is a caring, loving action, and I just bristle at the idea that sex is dirty, bad, wrong, and we shouldn't write about it, we shouldn't read about it, we shouldn't want to think about it, we shouldn't, maybe do it, we shouldn't have urges, especially as women. That really pisses me off.
Yeah.
Well, how many of those are because of, it's men saying it, or possibly women who actually have an axe to grind of some kind?
Yeah.
Those are always the sad things.
Yes. Well, and
course.
I had a conversation with somebody one time about, who was being very snotty about it. And I said, well, so you don't like Shakespeare? And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, Shakespeare wrote romances. You don't like Shakespeare?
Jokes.
Yeah. He pretty much invented the dick joke. So, and they're like, well, but I said, I use the same 600,000 words of the English language that Michener does. How come you don't think my book is a book? So anyway, I get on my high horse about it.
A lot of people that diss romance don't read it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Exactly.
Based on what they've heard instead of what they've investigated themselves. Because I can tell you, I did not read a romance until I was probably knowingly, let's put it that way, read a romance until I was probably in my 30s. I just had never read one. And if you're thinking about in your college and in your, prep school, we had this list of 100 stories that I can tell you right now, I didn't like most of them. Yeah, they were on the literature list, but they sucked.
Yeah.
But that's what I was reading. I mean, that's what I had to read. And so until I got, a little bit older and read for pleasure, I didn't really read romance. I think the first time I read romance is when my husband came home with a Wall Street Journal ad saying that Silhouette was looking for authors. They actually ran an ad in the Wall Street Journal for authors.
Wow.
wow.
And that was, when Ethan was 1979, 1980, they ran an ad. And he brought it home and I was writing a story and he said, you should write one of these. And so I said, okay. And so I went and bought them. And that was the first time I'd read a romance.
Yeah, but I think you've actually hit on it, Becky, is that the majority of people who are doing what Gail was talking about, it's dirty, bad, wrong, and this is horrible, and these are trashy beach reads, are people who have never read them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Readers will sometimes say, well, I read the smutty books. And honestly, I don't think they would read them if they just thought they were smut. And so my theory is that they're going to do it before the person they're talking to does it.
Oh, did it great at first. Okay.
And if they say, well, I read romance, the answer is going to be, oh, the smutty books. Whereas if you say, well, I just read the smutty books, then the conversation is over and the person, marches on. But I did a presentation to a college class one year, and I don't remember what year it was, but it was not long after the Bridges of Madison County came out to great acclaim. And a student started giving me stick about, you women just like your pornography. It turns out he had not read a romance. He had just skimmed through looking for the racy parts. And I just said, you know, The Bridges of Madison County is acclaimed as a great book. And I haven't read it. And it probably is a terrific book. I'm not dissing it. But it's about two people who pass like ships in the night. And that's considered to be a great book. Whereas books about people who are trying to shed their personal baggage to form a committed relationship, those are called smut. And I don't see what's smutty about people trying to form a commitment.
Well, I think the other thing that you touched on is that some people, just like some people have the idea that it's not adult to feel joy or wonder or giddiness, or that it's not realistic to think that people can stay in love for a lifetime. I think some people have been conditioned to believe that sex in and of itself in any situation is tainted and bad and sinful. And so they are carrying that shame into anything about sex. And that's their issue. But there's also, like your comment about women really love their pornography. Well, yes. Why shouldn't we?
That sounds like.
And again, it goes back to this idea that there is something wrong with women being interested in sex and not just being the passive participant for the male gaze. Because romance has been traditionally from the female gaze, or in LGBTQ from the other gaze that is not the traditional cis-het white male with all the power and money. And that changes how things happen in the bedroom too. So I think there's a lot to unpack on that whole smutty thing. And it's not the book's fault.
No, and it's kind of the tendency in the marketplace now for some who's to say, all right, clean romance. And I'd like to think they don't mean anything insulting by it, but by implication, everything that's not like that, what they write is dirty, which is
also really confused that a lot of those clean romances are set with the Amish. And having grown up in an area with a lot of Amish who have like 8, 10, 15 kids, those kids are coming from somewhere. So doing something.
They didn't hatch.
It may not happen on page, but man, they're not celibate. So I'm just wondering who they're fooling.
Well,
Eilis, what did you say? We kind of lost you.
Cutting out.
It's misogyny, basically.
yeah.
You know, those comments are usually from men. And, you know, once more, they have to make sure that women are kept in their place. And what they're interested in has to be put down.
Yeah.
But
unfortunately, I'm hopeful. Once again, circling back around to hope. I am really hopeful, though I see so much less of that than even when I started in the business, you know, in the early 2000s. I see less and less, thank goodness, of I just read the trashy books, or I see less and less of that. And I'm grateful. I'm more grateful than I can possibly say. And I think people have finally awoken to the fact that this is a huge marketplace. And if you're sitting there dissing what is a 60% of the reading market, the buying public, you might not want to do that. 60% of your customers, maybe not.
Well, speaking of the marketplace, we're kind of coming up on time. So let's wind up with the discussion with what authors would you recommend to readers who are interested in trying a romance and either have never read it before or have read one or two and don't really know kind of where to start? Becke, you want to start us?
Well, the bad thing is I've read so many. I like Actually, I'm reading or listening to, I don't have time to read anymore, and I don't have the eyesight at night usually, but by the time I've worked on the computer all day, but I'm reading The Beach Read. That's what I'm listening to right now. And that is really a cute story. It's got a lot of banter, but it's got great character arc. And so that one I think has been fun. That's Emily Henry. I was looking at it to see who the author was, but that's the one I'm listening to right now. And I would recommend that to anybody. And when I saw that, I mean, this author named it The Beach Read. And I thought, what is she going at for there? But it's actually a very entertaining and, like I said, well-written book. So that would be my recommendation, because that's the one I'm looking at reading right now. But I also like Catherine Center too.
Spell that name.
Catherine Center. She did Things You Save in a Fire. I think that was my favorite. Let's see. Another one I loved was Happiness for Beginners, and that was an English author, and that was a lot of fun. I like a lot of women's fiction too, but we're staying with romance. But like I said, Catherine Center, I liked her.
Gail?
I think, you know, if you like contemporary romance and you want to try male, Lucy Lennox's Wild series or Marion series are fantastic. They're just so much fun, and the characters are just so lovable. If you like paranormal, then Pandora Pine's Cold Case Psychic series or AJ Sherwood's Head Boppin' Mysteries are just, AJ takes a little more of a fun side to it. Pandora takes a little more of a serious side, but yeah, those were some of my gateway drugs. And if you really like the paranormal and want some eldritch horror with your romance, then Jordan L. Hawkes' Wyborn and Griffin series is just, I think, one of my all-time favorites.
Eilish?
Yeah, the reason I kept looking around is I have this one romance that I read at least once a year. And of course, at this point, I don't remember the title. I think it was by Sarah Seal. And it always does not, it always, it's everything about a romance for me. It's a simple story. It is actually, it's sort of May, December, but not really, because he's dead inside and she's just young and hopeful. But it is, it's a classic horror, and it wasn't, no, it wasn't reissued under the original name, which is part of the problem. But Sarah Seal.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you.
Ready, Jeannie?
Oh my gosh, so many. I'd recommend, if somebody's trying to get started, I'd recommend anything Nalini Singh has ever written. Obviously, everybody here are wonderful authors, and I would recommend all of them. Quanah Jackson's Real Men Knit is set in Harlem, and it is delightful. Farah Rashan's The Boyfriend Project, that one's also delightful. I just read one by Priscilla Olivieris, and I cannot remember the name of the book, so I'll have to check that one out, but she's great. I've read a couple of her books and they're good. Gosh, for suspense, romantic suspense, Suze Farrell. Love Kristen Higgins. They're contemporaries, they're delightful, they're cheerful, and they're easy on the heart. Let's put it that way, I guess. What about you, Nancy?
Well, for romantic suspense, it's hard to pick because there's so many people out there writing really good romantic suspense, but I would pick Cindy Gerard, Tara Janssen's Steel Street series, which is 11 or 12 books and is complete. I don't think, it doesn't look like there are going to be any more of them. And for paranormal romance, I was going to pick Nalini Singh.
So that's 2 votes.
Yeah, 2 votes for Nalini Singh for paranormal romance. And that series becomes more intense on the science fiction fantasy elements as it goes on. I'm just kind of trying to envision my shelves here. And unfortunately, my shelves now are virtual. So they're hard to, I can't like look across the room and see the shelf. That doesn't work.
Oh, on the mail, I'd say Charlie Cochet's third series too is a great paranormal series, and it's not only got a great paranormal suspense element, but it's funny as all get out. There are some laugh out loud funny spots in there.
Laugh out loud.
Well, I think that brings us kind of up on time. So let's go around real quick and just say what your social media information is and where people can find you. Becke?
They can find me at BeckeTurner.com. On Facebook, it's Rebecca Turner, because I did that a long time ago and Becke wasn't smart. When it said it wanted my name, I thought it had to be a legal name. So it started out with Rebecca Turner, and mainly you can go to BeckeTurner.com. That's the easiest way to find me.
Okay, Gail?
MorganBrice.com for the romance stuff, and all of my presence on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else. Look for Morgan Brice and you'll find me. BRICE.
Okay, Eilis?
EilisFlynn.com and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Okay, Jeanne?
JeanneAdams.com, and you can find me on most social media as Jeanne Adams. But you'll find me most on Twitter.
Okay, well,
and here on ConTinual.
Here on ConTinual. Well, and you can find me at NancyNorthcott.com. I'm on Twitter at Nancy Northcott, and I spend far more time there than is good for me. And I'm very occasionally on Facebook at Nancy Northcott Author. Thank you all for joining me, and thank you to everyone who's watching this panel, and watch this space because we have other good stuff coming.